A Daytime Nightmare, A Tale of Temptation and Betrayal. Episode 1. Everyone under the surface of the earth has their greatest fears. That fear, whenever you think of the possibility of it ever coming to pass, your whole body instantly gets cold and leaves you shivering. That fear has the ability to cripple your happiness if you dwell on it for too long. That fear that you usually don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about because the thought of it alone can be extremely scary. Well, just as everyone has their greatest fears, so did a woman named Becca. Several years back, Becca got married to the love of her life, and the man in question was a very handsome and well-to-do man. His name was Tony, and he was a stockbroker at a highly respectable firm. Due to the nature of Tony's job, he was hardly ever around, but he made so much money from his career as a stockbroker. In the initial stage of their marriage, Becca felt lonely most times and always complained to her husband that he should try to balance his work and family time, but all efforts to achieve that goal failed. Despite the fact that Tony wished to be there for his wife, he just couldn't do anything about his constant absence because his work schedule was always tight and busy. Their marriage looked extremely admirable from the outside, but no one knew that they were dealing with serious issues that determined their happiness as a couple. As time went on, Becca gradually adjusted to Tony's busy work life and stopped complaining. She was a faithful and good wife. Never for once did her mind ever stray to harbor any thought of cheating on her husband with someone else who was available and ready to fill in the gap. Becca was a virtuous woman that knew the intensity of her marriage vows. Well, too bad we can't say the same for Tony. It turns out that while Tony was starving his wife of his presence, there was someone somewhere getting every bit of it. To be honest, it wasn't Tony's intention to cheat on his wife, but things took a drastic turn when he came across a desperate lady that knew the act of mesmerizing men and bringing them down to do her bidding. A woman that is aware of her power can move mountains, be it in a good or bad way. Women are extremely powerful, but it's quite unfortunate that the majority don't know how much power they yield. The spinster that had captured Tony's heart was a lady in her late 20s named Jasmine. Tony met her one evening when he went out for dinner with his business associates. That day, she was sitting across his table, and he just couldn't take his eyes off her, no matter how hard he tried. It was such an uncomfortable dinner for the handsome married man, but there was no way he could excuse himself because he was in the midst of some friends. It turns out that it wasn't only Tony's attention that was caught, as Jasmine's attention was drawn to him too. She sat quietly and kept making gestures that were capable of drawing Tony's attention further to her. It was such a tough evening for him to avoid temptation and not cheat on his precious wife, but he lost the battle. On seeing that Tony and his business associate were done eating and wanted to leave, Jasmine knew that she had to act very fast. She waited for them to get up before making her move. Immediately they stood up to leave. She stood up too and pretended as though she was receiving a call. As she walked towards them, she pretended to be lost while receiving the call and knowingly collided with Tony.
Ouch. My wrist hurts.
Jasmine lied as she bent down to pick her phone that fell on the floor.
I'm so sorry, I wasn't looking.
Are you hurt? Tony calmly inquired.
I think I twisted my wrist.
She lied again. Tony stretched out his hands and held her hand. I really don't know much about bones. Can I take you to the hospital or clinic? He asked, and she accepted the offer. Without wasting any time, they walked together to Tony's car that was parked in the hotel's parking lot and zoomed out to the nearest clinic. When they arrived, Jasmine was immediately attended to, and her wrist was massaged.
Thank you for everything, I truly appreciate it.
She said after receiving treatment. It's okay, where do you live so I can drop you off before heading back to the hotel? Tony inquired.
Don't worry, I stay close by and will take myself home.
She said, but he insisted on driving her home. After much persuasion, Jasmine finally agreed for Tony to take her home. They drove for a little while and arrived at her location.
Like I said before, thanks for everything.
she said once more and blinked her eyes in a seductive way while at it.
You are welcome, you are pretty, you know.
Tony confessed, and Jasmine blushed.
Thanks, and you are quite handsome too.
She replied. They talked for a while, and Tony didn't just know why he was so drawn to Jasmine. There was just something mesmerizing about her that his head couldn't place rightly. He wanted to be done with her and find his way home to avoid being unfaithful to his wife, but sadly couldn't. The funny thing about the whole situation was that Jasmine knew what she was doing. Everything that happened that evening wasn't a coincidence but was rather planned. She faked everything, from the colliding, to the pain on her wrist, and so on, just to get Tony to talk to her and eventually reel him in. After discussing for almost 30 minutes, they exchanged numbers and parted ways. As Tony retired back to his hotel, he just couldn't get his mind off Jasmine's beautiful curves and pretty face. He fantasized about her as he drove all the way back to his hotel. While Tony was deep in thought, Jasmine walked a little further from where she was dropped off and knocked on the door that was thought to be hers. After about 3 knocks, a handsome guy opened the door, and she smiled towards him.
Hey baby, I miss you.
She said and blushed while at it. Where have you been? I have been waiting. The unknown guy inquired. She smiled and said,
Blame the traffic, baby. I left my house 3 hours ago, now give me a kiss.
The handsome mysterious guy held her shut, planted a soft kiss on her lips, and dragged her inside the apartment. Jasmine chuckled and said,
Now you are talking.
The doors were shut behind them afterward. It turns out that this mysterious guy was one of Jasmine's multiple lovers. She was a perfect example of that lady your mother warned you about. The deceptive thing about this young lady was that she didn't look the lifestyle she lived, and that's how come she could deceive just anyone into thinking she was a classy, good, and clean lady. Well, just when you thought you had seen it all, there's actually more jaw-dropping shocking revelation about her, which we will find out as we read up. After a wonderful time spent with the mysterious guy, Jasmine spent the night at his place and zoomed out first thing in the morning. When she arrived at her house, she entered the bathroom and sat in the shower for hours. She sobbed gently as she sat under the cascading water that gently beat her whole body. Different thoughts kept popping up in her head, and everything ceased when she heard her phone ring. As the phone rang, Jasmine got up and walked to where she dropped it. One look at the number that was calling, and she could stake her life that it was her new catch, Tony. She adjusted her voice and picked up the call.
Hello.
She greeted.
Hi, this is Tony. I hope I'm not calling at the wrong time or something.
He asked, and she quickly assured him that he wasn't.
I was actually expecting your call, to be honest.
Jasmine said. They talked for a little while before Tony asked if they could see each other again during the day. I have a business meeting later in the day and will be free afterward. Can we meet and have lunch? He inquired, and without hesitating, Jasmine accepted the offer, and a mini date was scheduled. For all the times Tony had to reconsider his actions and think of his loyal wife that didn't deserve to be cheated on, it's quite unfortunate that he couldn't retrace his steps just in time before a great calamity befell him and his household. Too bad that at the end, someone was going to pay dearly for another person's mistakes. Too bad. That same day, Jasmine had a doctor's appointment and had to quickly head down to the hospital to get more medical supplies for her health. When she arrived at the hospital, she went for some checkups and had to hurry down to the hospital pharmacy section to get her regular medical supplies.
Good day, ma'am.
She greeted.
Hello, Jasmine, how are you doing?
The nurse asked.
I'm going fine. Can I get my drugs?
She requested.
Sure, give me 1 second.
The nurse said. After waiting for a few minutes, the nurse returned with lots of antiretroviral drugs and handed them over to her. As Jasmine gently packed the drugs into her bag, the nurse dropped a shocker.
What's your greatest source of encouragement as an HIV patient?